All right, it is time to start our meeting. I would like to call to order the Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development, MSPBD, Committee meeting of the North County Transit District, 24th, 2022. Before I begin, I would like to inform members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. You must also register with the clerk by sending an email to clerk@nctd.org with a name and/or phone number and which item you would like to speak on. I will ask Suhil Rodriguez, clerk of the board, to call the roll.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Committee Chair Contreras.
Present.
Vice Committee Chair Hinsey.
Here.
Board Member White.
Present.
Board Member Desmond. That completes the roll.
All right, thank you so much for that. And Suhil will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Thank you. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There's a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thanks for keeping us safe. And Suhil, do we have any public comments today?
No, we do not, Madam Chair.
All right, so with that said, at this time, we are ending the public registration for general public comment. And before we get into speaking about specific items here on the agenda for this meeting, I would like to outline meeting protocols to make this meeting as efficient as possible. First, please hold your comments and/or questions until after the agenda item has been presented. Second, flip the page here. When the time comes for board member comments or questions, please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order received. First on the agenda, we will do an overview of the proposed calendar year 2023 MSPBD work plan. Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer, will introduce this item. You have our full attention, Chris. Come on down.
Okay, thank you, Chair Contreras. So you have in your packet the proposed work plan for the committee for the year. Each first meeting of each calendar year, the committee considers the work plan to help guide what the topics and content will be for the work for the year. So what you see before you on the screen and in your packet is the proposed plan for this calendar year. The first meeting being today, in which you'll receive the work plan, you'll get an update on the service implementation plan, and then you'll also receive an update on services and outreach and activities that we're doing for limited English proficiency passengers. Our second meeting of the year would be in June, where we would provide an update on customer feedback trends and initiatives, as well as, and I apologize, there was a typo in this particular one, is actually the FY 2024 Marketing and Communications Program. So it'll be the look forward as in terms of the marketing program for the coming year. At the point in that, when that meeting occurs, the budget would have already been considered by the board. And so what we'll cover in that meeting would be an outline of what the year ahead holds for marketing and communications. And so that would be the Marketing Communications Program overview for FY 2024. And then an October meeting, we provide an update on safety and security, as well as an update on the Breeze speed and reliability study, and then an update on the strategic business initiatives. So for those that aren't familiar with the strategic business initiatives, those are included as a part of the FY 24 budget adoption, and we provide the board with quarterly updates on the progress towards those initiatives, so the committee will get an in-depth update of what those initiatives are at that point. And this work plan is not something that's formally adopted, so there is flexibility if there is other topics that the committee would like to hear or receive an update on, or information you'd like to receive. But this is, how we see the year unfolding. And that's it. With that, I'll take any questions or changes.
All right, hold on a second here. Sue Heel, do we have any public comments for this agenda item?
No, Madam Chair.
All righty. So at this time, we are ending public registration to speak on this item, and I'll turn over to committee members. Are there any questions? Okay, I guess I have all the questions right now. So when we are going to review, get an update on safety and security, is this going to continue the conversation that we had brought forward regarding folks that are experiencing homelessness and the type of services that, and I don't know if Supervisor Desmond's, how long that pilot program was for, but are we going to get more feedback on that situation and how many folks we've outreach to? I know it's not an initiative that NCTD has put forward. We kind of have a more narrow scope when it comes to how we interface as an agency with folks who are experiencing homelessness. But I think that there's a lot that we could do to ensure that whatever jurisdiction we may be in, if they have, a hot team or social workers, that we are crossing those arbitrary boundaries that we have, and ensuring that the resources that that jurisdiction has, that we can tap into that. So can you let me know what that looks like?
Yeah, as you know, we do have active programs around that topic, and would be happy to include it in that update, and both give you an update of what's happened to date, but also sort of plans going forward. So yeah, that's out of the Safety and Security Department, so perfect place to put that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to continue to have that conversation. And I would also ask that, have we done a survey or have any feedback from our employees as to how, what they see? There are boots on the ground, so what they're seeing, whether it's on the Sprinter, the Breeze buses, on the coaster, and kind of take in their feedback and concerns or points that they see that are, possible initiatives that we could take on. Do we have anything like that in place that we can plug into this update in October?
Yeah, we actually do. So in February, we launched two things. One, we were in a position to put in the hands of every employee their Pronto cards, with their photo on them. So that was great. We got all the employees in the system their Pronto cards. And when we rolled those out, we also rolled out what we call a Rate Your Ride survey, where we ask that after employees ride the system, they can give us feedback on what occurred on that ride, whether it's a safety, security, something they noticed, or it was great, whatever it might be. And so there's a real simple tool that we have on our intranet that after an employee rides, they can just click the Rate Your Ride. The planning and service team takes that input and gets it out to the right operating component of the agency. And so, yeah, that's an active program that we have in place.
Okay. Yeah, just because, as I ride different forms of NCTD services, I've had different conversations with, whether it's a bus operator or conductor, or someone who's checking fares, right? There's always a little bit of a conversation that happens. And, I think there are some real concerns that our employees have. And I just want to ensure that, their concerns and some of the concerns that maybe they are hearing from the public as well, that we are able to address that. We know that folks that are experiencing homelessness utilize transit, public transit, sometimes just to be able to get to sleep. It's a safe, secure place. It's also, some of the times it's the public space that's available in a city where, one can utilize public facilities like restrooms. So I want to ensure that as we are looking at providing safety and security, especially as our youth opportunity program continues, that we are not creating, at the same time that we're trying to implement certain strategies, that we're not creating a situation in our public spaces that's deterring folks from utilizing public space, but that instead that we, and maybe again, we can't lead this as an agency, but that we are able to say, hey, we know that we have a certain population of folks that need to be connected to different resources. And we are going to facilitate that in X, Y, Z way. And that's something that I'm really looking forward that, as we get these updates on safety and security, that not only are we getting updates on what's happening, but that we can have a forward-thinking conversation about certain strategic plans that we may need to, ask the county for more resources or ask the different jurisdictions for more resources. So anyways, I wanted to ask about that, just to clarify. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions or comments.
On that, one other thing I should note that in July of last year, we formed an employee safety committee. That was a part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that required agencies that receive federal funds to have a active employee safety committee. And so those are, it's made up of frontline folks who participate and give input, not only on what they're seeing on the system, but also suggestions for how to improve safety. So that's been active and running, and we're getting that input through that committee.
Awesome. And we get a ton of information that we have to read through. So perhaps this is some information from that, internal committee that has already been put in a public agenda and I just don't remember it. Have we ever received any kind of formal information, whether it's meeting minutes or topics addressed or anything from that internal committee?
I can check for you. I don't know that there's been a formal report out, but I can find out for you.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, if there hasn't, then I think it's important for that to come as part of the safety and security presentation, in whatever form it is, works for the committee to look at that information and be able to just understand a little bit more about our employees' perspective, right? So I appreciate that. And the last thing I want to ask is, I really want more community fairs for NCTD and for the public. So where would that fit into this proposed work plan?
So that would be a part of the marketing communications program that you'll receive in June. And we are ramping those up. As you know, we did the cleanup in Vista. And we were out this weekend in Escondido for their.
Which was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, so we are ramping that work up because we recognize that community engagement's one of the most important things we do.
I don't mean to interrupt you too, but I will say they were there.
Your speaker on?
It is, I think. Anyways, the little lights on. They were there at the Green Transportation Expo we had in Escondido, and my wife and kids went and separated from me at the beginning. When my kids came back, they had a bag of swag that was from North County Transit District, and it was the best swag that was there. So it was quite impressive.
We try with the swag.
And board member Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah, those are really excellent and insightful comments. And I'm really grateful that you ride transit. And so you can bring that knowledge to us, because I think sometimes it's missing. And I would like to ride more so that I can have that deep level of insight that you bring, because it's so valuable. But I'll just add, in the city of Encinitas, as we develop our homeless action plan, we are convening stakeholders within the city to inform that plan. And one of the programs that's underway is our HOPE program. And that is where we have an in-house social worker, plus a county social worker, and then a member of our local deputies who can address issues without having to call the cops and make a big deal out of it. And so I consider NCTD one of the stakeholders that we should be inviting into our conversation to see what we can do to support transit in our city. So I do hope that there's some communication. If I can help facilitate that, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will pass that along to our security team as well.
Awesome. Yes. So I look forward to some more community fairs. I'm so glad that it went awesome this Saturday. And let's see here. So this is informational only. There's no vote required. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item. The next item on our agenda is an update on the development of the FY 2024 Service Implementation Plan, its assumptions and forecasts. Katie Persons, Director of Service Planning, will be providing an update. Katie, thank you so much. And our attention is on you.
Great, thank you so much. Next slide, please. Jump right in. So the Service Implementation Plan, or the SIP, is a 10-year document within the annual operating budget that provides service level assumptions for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as a 10-year outlook. The document includes inputs such as hours, miles, and ridership to inform the budget, and service levels are ultimately dependent on availability of projected operating and capital revenues and budgeted expenses. Next slide, please. So we have varying levels of and layers of detail within the SIP depending on the time frame. The information within the SIP for FY 2024 includes detailed monthly projections by mode. This detailed information helps us to inform elements within the budget, such as projected fare revenue, projected fuel budgets, etc. We also have monthly projections for the next 2 to 3 fiscal years solely to inform service planning activities, so out to FY 2027. However, those are refined each year as we approach the relevant fiscal year to more accurately incorporate available funding projections. The SIP also includes annual modal projections out to FY 2033, which are also adjusted based upon relevant project timelines and are again subject to funding availability. Next slide, please. So the SIP is developed under the framework of NCTD's key pillars of operational excellence, organizational excellence, customer excellence, and community connection. The executive director also provides annual budget guidance that helps inform key service elements. Next slide, please. So there are 3 key assumptions that feed into this year's service implementation plan. The first is that ridership goals, revenues, and expenses are budgeted conservatively to ensure a balanced budget. The second is that we've re-baselined ridership data to reflect a new post-COVID-19 reality. The previous year's SIP included projections that were structured around % recovery from FY 2019, which typically the SIP in past non-COVID years has been structured around previous year travel pattern trends. So to utilize more recent data, we've built the ridership projections around growth trends within the past fiscal year, taking into account key elements such as the continuation of YOP and the ongoing operator shortage. Then third, we've included a phased restoration of free service consistent with the information that was previously provided at the January Board of Directors meeting. Last year's SIP included some very ambitious projections for Breeze restoration of service that we unfortunately weren't able to meet. However, this year's SIP reflects our revised targets for October 2023 and April 2024 based on recent hiring trends. Next slide, please. And just to remind you of the routes that were impacted by the temporary Breeze service reduction, we have the routes in teal here that were generally reduced from every 15 to 20 minutes to every 30 minutes. And so we were able to restore 20-minute frequencies on Route 350 in Escondido in the most recent service change earlier this month. And then we have 2 packages of proposed restoration for October 2023 and April 2024, subject to operator availability. Here we have a preliminary annual summary of operating statistics by mode for FY 2024. The SIP document will reflect a few different views of this data, including comparison to the previous 2 fiscal years and other relevant information. Particularly, this ridership data is what informs the monthly budgeted goal that you see in the monthly transit operations performance report in each board agenda packet. Next slide. And as a note, service statistics for NCTD Plus microtransit services are not included as a separate mode within this year's budget, as they'll be operated on a 12-month pilot basis within the fiscal year. Expenditures for NCTD Plus microtransit pilots will be captured separately and incorporated into future year budgets upon successful completion of those pilot periods. Moving into the 10-year view of key operating statistics, we have annual summaries of total boardings and total miles and hours. There are several desired service enhancements that are included within the 10-year outlook and subject to available funding. That includes the increase of Breeze frequencies on select routes, the increase of coaster trips from 30 daily trips to 36 daily trips. And both of those are happening in FY 2025 as proposed. The opening of Convention Center Station and extension of all coaster trips, as well as new microtransit zones proposed in FY 2026. Additional coaster frequency expansion to 42 daily trips in FY 27. And finally, the increase in sprinter frequency to every 15 minutes, subject to successful completion of double tracking projects in FY 32. And all of these are subject to available operating funding and dependent on a few different project priorities. But these initiatives stay on the horizon for us and are adjusted each budget year to reflect any changes in funding levels, project status, priorities, etc. NCTD is advancing several near-term initiatives to grow ridership, improve service quality, and attract new customers. Longer-term initiatives reflect the executive director's budget guidance and any supplementary information from initiatives such as NCTD's market research study. And we'll touch on a few of those initiatives in the next couple of slides. The first one is the Coaster 510 pack, which was launched recently in February. This fare product will help attract hybrid workers returning to the office, as well as capture the growing market for weekend and leisure travel on the coaster. We've sold over 300 passes so far and anticipate that to grow as we've entered Padres season and as May 1st indicates a key return to office date for a few large employers in Sorrento Valley. Next slide, please. The Youth Opportunity Pass presents a great opportunity for kids to try transit and get hooked. We've also implemented a change with this current school year to streamline how information is shared about routes that serve schools so that school administrators and parents and guardians can stay informed. Next slide. An important effort underway is the Breeze Speed and Reliability Study. So far, the project team has compiled and vetted a list of over 300 recommendations, both big and small, of different projects that could improve the reliability and travel time competitiveness of NCTD's Breeze bus network. The team is currently prioritizing the recommendations, and we anticipate providing that update in the October MSPBD committee. Next slide. Alongside the Breeze Speed and Reliability Study, we have investment in core Breeze routes. That goes hand in hand with that study and proposes Breeze frequency increases in FY 2025 and later fiscal years, subject to operator funding availability. For the SIP that's proposed today, we've proposed route frequency increases on routes 302 and 303 in Oceanside and Vista, and routes 351 and 352 in Escondido. Ultimately, these increases would be subject to board approval at a later date, but these increases provide a framework for the SIP to build out investment in the Breeze routes. Next slide. We've updated the SIP to better reflect project timelines associated with the Sprinter signal modernization and double tracking efforts, and we currently have that frequency increase proposed for FY 2032. Next slide. And finally, on the coaster side, we anticipate that the Convention Center Station would be open for operation in sometime late FY 2026, so that slight increase in revenue miles and revenue hours is incorporated in the SIP. And this station will be major for our Padres service and other demand generators downtown. We already see quite a significant boost in ridership associated with Padres season. And with this station, we'd be able to offer a one-seat ride to Petco Park and Gaslamp. Next steps. So for next steps for us, we'll continue to refine the inputs into the SIP and complete an interdepartmental review of the document and appendices. The board will receive an update on the budget development process at the May 18th Board of Directors meeting, and then the board would ultimately be asked to approve the budget at the June 15th, 2023 meeting. And with that, any questions and feedback on the SIP?
Thank you so much. And Suhail, do we have any public comments for this agenda item?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, so at this time, we are ending the public registration to speak on this item. And any questions from the committee? All right, I have a few questions. We talked about possibly having a flat rate on the coaster. Is that concept being built into the SIP?
Not the SIP per se at this point. I don't know how much I can share, but we are proposing for the upcoming operating budget to conduct a kind of further financial assessment of that concept that was included in the Deloitte study. So I don't think you would see that incorporated until the completion of that financial assessment. So likely not until the FY 2025 SIP would that be
Okay.
reflected.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just curious. I'm looking at the slide that has the 10-year projection overview, and it'd be interesting to see what a flat rate on the coaster would do for these little lines that I'm seeing in front of me. And okay, so I'll be looking for that. When it comes to the micro transit pilots, or NCTD plus, I want to provide feedback regarding, at least from my perspective in the city of Vista. I sometimes have to use Uber or Lyft, and it can be really challenging to use that. So I know that you and I have had a discussion offline about this. Do you know if we will be able to get more information from Uber and Lyft regarding how many I guess drivers are
Yeah.
available in that area?
We haven't submitted the data request yet, but we plan to.
Okay.
And I think that's a really important piece of information, especially when we're comparing the ridership levels between Vista and other zones that we've done. Definitely the vehicle availability is a key part. And they've indicated that they'd be willing to share information like that if we have kind of more specific targeted requests. So I don't see an issue yet, but we'll be requesting that soon and
Okay.
we'll give an update.
Yeah, even if it's, they're probably not used to public records requests
exactly.
and stuff like that. So, but I guess if I had to narrow it down, I would want to ask them how many rides were requested and unfulfilled within a certain time frame, and how many had to be canceled. Because I know I've gone in there and it's just like, I'm waiting, and I get frustrated. I'm like, maybe my internet's not working, maybe I'm not connecting. So then I like cancel and I go back in. And there's been quite a few times where it's not very reliable. And I've had conversations with drivers. Unfortunately or fortunately, I talk to everybody, even for little bits of time. And they're like, yeah, I got stuck in Vista. Like, they're like, did you have a hard time getting this right? And I was like, yeah, I did. And so they're aware of it, the drivers. I just don't know what that data actually looks like. And I feel like that could, maybe be skewing some of the data that we receive on our NCTD plus, which is why I think that moving towards NCTD having its own vehicles to do this, that reliability piece is going to be there. And I much would rather, if I have, 25 minutes and I know I need to get to, a certain place and I have enough time to do that, I want to know that when I request a ride that I'm actually going to be able to get one, or else I'm going to have to figure out how to get there anyways. And I might have to walk to a bus stop and then get off and then walk to the remaining portion, right? And I think that's just not really built into some of these TNCs. So anyways, I think that would be a really great, just some data for us to have and be able to food for thought and see how that affects us. And then when it comes to, there was a little picture of a bus only lane. I'm a huge proponent of this. In my own city, we have restriped certain arterials where there were only 2 lanes. Now there's 3. And I don't know, I've heard from the public and I've seen from my own, with my own eyes, that maybe that 3rd lane wasn't needed, but now we can maybe turn it over to the public again in either a bus only lane or a bike and bus shared lane. So what are the conversations like with the different jurisdictions about, because there might be City of Encinitas that put something forward. Is there a way for us to stay really in sync with these different jurisdictions as they're moving forward with, looking at repurposing the right of way for different transportation and active transportation strategies? How lockstep are we on that?
I would say prior to this study, we weren't very lockstep. I think this study is the perfect vehicle for being more in sync with those types of initiatives, especially as they happen kind of more frequently or more often now. I think that the best part of the breeze speed and reliability study is that it gives us these very specific recommendations and specific projects that we can then bring to the table as kind of our contribution. And it's very crystal clear what our priorities are. And it gives us that kind of stepping stone to bring into those conversations, whereas before we might not have had those concepts fleshed out in the way that they are. One key kind of element or end package of the study will be kind of a streamlined summary for each key zone. I won't say jurisdiction, but kind of key region that summarizes the recommendations, summarizes the next steps, kind of lays it all out in a very easy to understand way that I think will be very important for these conversations to make sure that we're much more in step going forward.
And those recommendations are, those are really going to need to be city-driven infrastructure projects. So we'll provide the information. We'll try and set the table as best we can, but it's really the city infrastructure that will need to be done. But the nice thing is that those benefits aren't just for NCTD, right? It benefits every traveler on those roads, depending on what the infrastructure changes. So we're really excited about it because we think here's a way where we can not only make the bus, here are ways, because it's going to be a lot of recommendations, not only make the Breeze bus more reliable and move faster, but also help address local congestion as well. So we think it'll be really attractive to cities for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. We may not have the political will at this time in every city to say, we're going to have transit priority lanes and transit priority signalization changes. But, I think it's critical for us as an agency, for our perspective, to say we need our bus to move through this congestion faster, right? And it really does help everybody. And I mean, just because the transit center in Vista, I know it so well, and I've been stuck on the bus, right? Because I'm thinking too, the grade separation projects that we're looking at, some of them really critical, where our emergency services need to get through, Vista Village being one of them, Nordal and Escondido being one of them. Being able to move the bus quickly through those intersections along with grade separation, that's probably because the grade separation conversation isn't 100% done. It's probably not in this, but will it eventually get in there as well as part of the SIP?
As part of the SIP. I would say not necessarily in the service implementation plan, but certainly within the capital improvement program,
Okay.
within the budget, it would be included there. I think any sort of travel time savings associated with these major capital projects as they come online. And of course, the other kind of associated sprinter projects, the signal modernization, double tracking, that will impact the SIP in terms of
Right.
hours and miles. But you wouldn't see specifically that project listed out for the SIP, but certainly for the CIP,
Okay.
should that be proposed.
Awesome, awesome. And another thing that I want to just highlight is I haven't heard really any talk about BRT, bus rapid transit. Where would that fit into it? Because there's a conversation that Sandag's having about a certain route that's a BRT route in Escondido. So, where does that fit into us and what we're going to be talking about and setting aside money for and that kind of stuff?
I think it's a combination of both the SIP and also kind of more of the regional initiatives for those types of services. We coordinated with Sandag in the beginning for their next gen rapid study and for our study so that we weren't duplicating efforts on certain corridors in Escondido. So we are closely linked, and we have Sandag as part of the project development team, Sandag and Caltrans, for the breeze speed and reliability study. Where we would start to see it in the SIP is where we're proposing kind of a new tier of service, you would say, of breeze service. So whether it's kind of new type of either commuter bus or something similar, you would see that in the SIP, as well as those levels of frequency and that type of investment. If it's also benefits to other routes that might travel along that corridor, you would see that mentioned kind of in a more high level way but it would be proposed within the SIP if we're adding service or substantially increasing frequencies on specific corridors as identified in both of those projects.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to seeing these things as they materialize. And I just wish that, it's great that Escondido's having one. I wish that there was one. There's so much flow between Vista and Oceanside. I think, we need to figure out how we're going to have some kind of BRT there. But I really appreciate everything. I wanted to check in with my board members to see if there's any other comments or. All righty. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Let's see, we're moving on here. This is another informational item, so no vote required. And that quickly, we're on to our last item on our agenda. This will be an update on services and outreach efforts being done to assist those customers with limited English proficiency. Bradley Sarin, staff attorney, and Colleen Windsor, marketing and communications director, will review the item number 3. Brad and Colleen, you have our attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go over is the regulatory framework of how we came about with our Title VI program and our language implementation plan. Talk about what resources are available for members of the public and our passengers and staff for limited English proficiency individuals. Then I'll pass it over to Colleen to kind of talk about some of the most recent outreach events that we've had. Next slide, please. So when I'm talking about Title VI, there's a multitude of different federal and state laws that are required to be complied with. The foundation of it is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination just based off of race, color, and national origin. But subsequent to that, there's been a multitude of different regulations that have come out, mainly the most important one being the FTA Circular 4702.1b, which contains basically the specific requirements regarding what needs to be inside NCTD's Title VI program and what needs to be included with our language assistance plan. So NCTD's Title VI program plan is a condition of receiving money from the Federal Transit Administration. It's something that is updated every 3 years and sent to the FTA for their review and their concurrence. Some of the things that go inside NCTD's Title VI program plan is our non-discrimination complaint policies and procedures for members of the public to file a complaint. Staff members are able to file discrimination complaints under a separate policy. It also contains our language assistance plan, our public participation plan, and then what mechanisms that we have in place, such as our board policies, to help make sure that there's not going to be any disproportionate burdens or disparate effects on minority or low-income passengers when we're doing things like fare service changes. Next slide, please. So in regards to our language assistance plan, the big thing that we do is when we update it is we analyze, it's called a 4-factor analysis. We conduct this in collaboration with SANDAG. So SANDAG is able to provide us a lot of the data that we need, and then the rest of it is kind of on our shoulders to kind of go out there and get the information. But the big things that we're looking at is the number and proportion of LEP persons served within our eligible service area, how frequently they come into contact with our program, our activity, our services, how important that particular thing is to those individuals, and what resources that we have as an agency that we can be able to implement. So when we're getting all this information, there's a lot that we're collecting. There's surveys that go out to all of our customer-facing staff that ask them about, what is their experiences with individuals who have a limited ability to speak English. What kind of services would be nice for them to be able to communicate with them, and just any other comments that they have regarding the types and numbers of people who are interacting with. Now, this is just based off of their best guess. So if they're saying that they're meeting an individual that, speaking Tagalog or Vietnamese or Chinese, we can't verify it. It's just based off of what their best guess is at that point in time. But we take all that together and then sit down and then from there figure out, what it is that we currently have. We can also work with other public transit agencies and see what they've done to implement best practices, and then figure it out from there. Next slide, please. So as of our last Title VI plan that was submitted to the FTA in 2021, It determined that in regards to the passengers who have a limited English ability to speak, the overwhelming majority of them are Spanish speakers, with just under 82% being the LEP population. It is notable, though, that we do come into contact, albeit not as frequently, with people whose primary language is Vietnamese, Chinese, both traditional and Mandarin, Tagalog, and then Korean as well. So based off of all that data, everything that we do, we put it all together and then essentially figure out, bare bone, what is the most vital things that those passengers are going to need to be able to use our services effectively. And so all those bare bone things are called our vital documents. And so all of our vital documents are automatically translated into Spanish. Some of them are translated into those other languages that were identified there, but just based off of how often the other ones are updated and just type of information, it may not be translated in those languages. But again, everything is automatically translated into Spanish regarding our vital documents. And so when I talk about vital documents, I'm talking about our rider's guide, our ADA rider's guide. We have a notice to all of our beneficiaries of what their rights are under Title VI and how to file a complaint. If we have any public hearings or anything that's going to affect them, those notices are translated automatically into Spanish. We have a specific complaint policy if they feel like they're being discriminated against, that they can have the complaint, file a complaint and have it addressed, and then as well as the discrimination complaint form. Next slide, please. In regards to the resources that we have for our passengers, the biggest thing that we have is our multilingual website, and we have internal staff who have volunteered to translate language or information or be an interpreter for other individuals. We also have translated contact information into those LEP notices. So at the bottom of that notice, you see in that yellow section there, there's a statement in all those languages that tells the passenger how to call customer service to basically get more information in that language. What happens from there is they can call our customer service staff, and we have a consultant on call who can interpret and translate into hundreds of different languages. And so what we'll do from there is we can set up a three-way call. We call the interpretation company, let them know, what the language is that we're trying to communicate with, and we can set up a three-way call at that point in time so that we can get the meaningful dialogue going on and pass everything off. Other than that, like I said, our Title VI complaint forms, procedures, everything, all of our vital information is already translated into that. And then we have the bilingual staff on hand as well. Next slide, please. Some of the other resources available to staff are this I Speak form. So this form you see there on the right, it has a statement in the language that says that, this is the language that I'm speaking, and then has the person marked to identify what language they're speaking. This allows them that if someone comes in and the staff member has no idea what it is that they're talking about, you can pull out the sheet, they can identify it, and then that way they can, refer it to the appropriate person or use one of our translators or interpreters if needed. We have an employee language list, which on an annual basis, I send out a survey to request staff who have an ability to speak or write in another language and wish to volunteer on an as-needed basis to speak or help out with a situation that we may need some translation or interpretations. The other thing that we have is an LAP committee group, which is a group that meets on a semi-annual basis. We get a representative from basically all the forward-facing, or all the customer-facing staff. We all sit down, kind of talk about what services that we have, if there's anything that we can improve, any issues, anything going on, and then figure out, what the best way is to resolve it at that point in time. Next slide. And then I'll pass it over to Colleen here.
Good afternoon. So we get the fun part of it. We know the importance of being able to communicate with our riders and potential riders, both in English and in Spanish. And as Bradley already alluded to, when you look at our modes, any of the materials that are vital documents, such as the Title VI information, there's a sticker on all of our modes to talk about that. And then our schedules, of course, are both in English and Spanish on Coaster and Sprinter. We have system maps that are at all of our stations that show all the different routes, whether it's Breeze or Sprinter or Coaster. And then our Pronto Quick Start, which is also very vital information because that's how our passengers pay for their fares. Next slide. So all of these documents are both in English and Spanish as we're looking at marketing to our customers to inform them of things that might be going on, promotional opportunities. The customer alerts, those will be rider alerts that you'll find in the modes that they can take a copy of. Super important information, whether it's holiday schedules, so that they know immediately and ahead of time how to plan their routes if there's going to be a deviation to the schedule. Padres information has been super important lately, so that folks know the opportunities that they have when we have additional trains coming back. Rosa Parks Day, that was a free ride day. Everyone likes to take on advantage of those things, so those are both in Spanish and in English. As you'll see on the graphic there, that was actually for New Year's Eve and providing that information. And it's not only, it's on all aspects of communication that we're doing. So it's on marketing materials that are at the ticket vending machines. When they look at the screens, they'll have pop-up information if we're doing a campaign, both in English and Spanish, as well as rider alerts. Looking at any kind of brochure, we're providing that information. I already talked about the interior mode decals on all of them, outreach posters, and then we do digital campaigns, which I'll get into a little bit, but those are also, if you're on social media or if you're on the internet somewhere, you'll see those digital ads that are both in English and Spanish. And then internally, we also provide information in both English and Spanish. We did an internal recruitment for our maintenance of way, and we had an open house, and we presented that information in those flyers that were presented in the different facilities, both in English and Spanish. Next. So Where To has been our marketing campaign for almost a year, and we use that to form people of kind of an aspirational opportunity of where they might take transit. So it's not only for our current riders to consider if maybe they take transit to work, that maybe they'll do it for leisure as well, but it's also to outreach to people who maybe don't take transit and they might consider that. So we try to make it aspirational in various ways, letting them know of new promotional fares that might be, as Katie talked about earlier, the Coaster 5 and 10 pack, the Padres. Fair Tripper is coming up, and that's an opportunity for people to understand that they can get not only admission to the fair, but a free ride, an incorporated ride to the Solana Beach Transit Station, the Del Mar races. Back to school is always a really big opportunity with our school system to ensure that we're communicating to parents prior to school starting of what their opportunities are. The Youth Opportunity Pass was very successful in that. And also back to work, as Katie alluded to earlier in the meeting, we're starting to see people going back to the office. So it's important to let them know, or to their job site. It's important to let those folks know, both in English and in Spanish, of the opportunities that they have. So as I talked about, we're doing this both on social media and on paid digital display ads, in radio, in CTV ads. So we're trying to touch people wherever they might be, not just in a single source. Next slide. And then more specifically about social media. So we do our own social media posts in both English and Spanish. You won't find every single one done in both, but we try to specifically target the intentional ones, but we also do those paid social media ads. And it's on the similar topics that I talked about earlier. Next slide. And then community surveys. Katie alluded to it again, of some of the changes in our schedules, both for the Breeze 347 and the 302 and 303, to be able to provide surveys. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? And both making sure that we're communicating in Spanish for those folks to be able to weigh in and have their voice heard. And we also have what we call a hot take survey. How was your ride? Simply put. And the QR code that you'll find there is you get to be able to respond to that pretty strategically and streamlined. But if you had additional comments, the QR code leads you to our comment and complaint page on our website, so that both in Spanish and English, folks can let us know how their ride was, and we can then respond to that. Next. And then we most recently have been starting to do Spanish-specific outreach events. We have the very great fortune of having Spanish-speaking bilingual staff on hand who have been willing to participate in outreach events so that we can communicate very specifically and directly with our Spanish-speaking writers. So we had some folks out at the Palomar College in January. Again, that outreach for the change in the schedule with Breeze 302 and 303 that was proposed. And then a customer appreciation pop-up, just letting folks know, thanks so much for writing. We had materials in Spanish to be able to communicate with them if they wanted to take information, whether it's the writer guide. And then we have, promotional giveaways to remind them, we appreciate you writing. We want to hear how we are doing. And we had Spanish-speaking staff out there to be able to communicate with them, and obviously our English-speaking writers as well. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair for any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And Suhail, do we have any public comments for this agenda item?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, so at this time, we are ending public registration to speak on the item. And are there any questions from the committee members? Go ahead.
Thank you. Good presentation. Just a few questions. So it seems like the information that we're collecting is mostly mandated in the format that we collect it. For example, I saw that we know we have 5% of Spanish speakers within our NCTD jurisdictions. But it seems like it would be a little bit more important to us as an agency to figure out what percentage of our users, our writers, are Spanish speaking, because I imagine it would be higher once you factor that in. And so I'm curious to know that number, and maybe that helps us be able to channel better resources based on like how we're supporting our Spanish speaking writers, because it just seems like it would be a lot higher than that. And then I'm happy to hear that there aren't just written materials to be able to provide language translation and access to our resources, but also the live calls. And I wonder if we could take it a step further, and maybe we're already doing this and I just don't know, but in other agencies I serve on, like the dispatch, for example, where it's imperative that dispatchers can speak Spanish if somebody calls and only is speaking Spanish, that we offer a hiring incentive for bilingual folks, because I think that would be a really good use of instead of having to have an outside translator come in that, it is not part of the agency and that's a service, instead of having that core, our employees are bilingual and we actually actively seek that out. I think that would be a great asset for us. It's really great to hear the digital marketing strategy. And I think that I'm really pleased at our social media presence and how actively we post and all of the service updates that we provide. And I, as a board member, learn a lot about our agency just by looking back through our social media posts and getting these tidbits about like the development we're doing here in the Poinsettia Station. And so I would say, keep that up and, let's do more. Let's figure out more ways that we can be communicating with our writers that way and the wider community. Oh, sorry. Let's see, what else did I want to say? So the community surveys, I wanted to just dial in my understanding about this. So when Katie presented us with the community surveys and board member Contreras asked about it, to me it sounded like all our employees who are probably the operators are provided the opportunity to say how their ride was. Is that, and then we're also doing it for our writers, so they can also have that opportunity. And is there any incentive that we offer? Like if, you could get a $5 gift card or a free ride or some way that if you do give us feedback on that, we would know more, because I think that complaints are really important, but it's also really important for us to know what's going well, being that we're spending money on like our consultants to figure out how do we attract more writers, but how do we attract more writers building on the things that we're already doing well, I think would be helpful for us in multilingual approach. So what's the answer to that question? When we are saying that we're doing both surveys that are directed towards our operators, is that every ride that they're finishing, that they're rating that ride? Or is this more just like, if you're an employee and you're having a ride that you want to comment on, you have that possibility?
It's the second one. So it's more of a voluntary, when they ride, you can fill out the survey. So it's not every ride. It's when employees ride and want to add. And we don't currently offer incentive either for the hot take survey that you saw or for the employee one. It's more of a volunteer type.
Got it. Okay,
approach.
thank you. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to offer an incentive. Also, if somebody is, having a bad ride and they're an operator, they just finished it. If I'm putting myself in that position, probably the last thing I want to do is keep dwelling in that. And so having to take my own time, maybe when I'm off the clock, to fill out a survey or to digest what just happened, I'd be more likely to do it if I knew I could do it on the clock and that there would be, you know, something that is incentivizing me to keep grappling with that experience.
And those surveys really are more for the general employment population than the operators.
I
So
see.
when, you know, folks at the administrative offices or other places ride, that's you know, the employee, the operators have feedback through other channels than that particular survey. So
Got it. Okay. Well, maybe even for employees, if there was some incentive to engage in that way, it would be helpful.
yeah, and we are it used prior to COVID, we had a pretty specific employee ridership program, mystery rider program that got paused during COVID, but we will be restarting that program soon. So it's not, you know, so we're actually putting some parameters around how often, you know, folks ride and you know, filling out those surveys, because it's important not only for, you know, eyes and ears, more eyes and ears on the system, but also for just the general familiarity with everybody in terms of who works here, in terms of you know, what the experience is like for the customer when they ride. You know, whether you work in accounting or you work in customer service or you work in marketing, you know, the view is that you should be familiar with the system. You should ride. You should know what it feels like to be out there and experience what our customers experience.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. I think the last comment I have is when we are doing these drives, and that's not for you, I don't think this one's for you, Chris, but when we're doing these drives, like I forget what it was called, like, where are you going to go? Where can you go? Racetracks, Padres Stadium, this and that. I hope we're putting equal effort into these awareness campaigns for our biggest employers, because it sounds like that's the bread and butter of this agency. And so just as we did with the Youth Opportunity Pass, where we're over communicating with districts to let them know that their students have this opportunity, that we're also doing that for employers. And we touched on that during our strategic plan last week, but I think that that's just so worthwhile. Like, do all the employees at the city of Encinitas know that right now they can use their flexible savings account to purchase these 5 and 10 packs? Like, I'm gonna go home and do that, because to me, that's a really good use of that money that I can use tax-free, so.
Yeah, and we did do a where to campaign specifically around hybrid work and back to work, and just themed around the folks from a commuter standpoint using the service. So that was an area of that. You were talking about the where to campaigns, which we highlight various things. So yeah, that was an element of that campaign, was sort of a back to work, you know, where to back to work type of campaign.
All right, so I have a few questions. It's really interesting to see the different LEP populations, but what I'm also curious about is, you know, out of the complaints that we receive or just general comments or questions, you know, what percentage of those are in these certain languages? Because I don't think any of the information spoke specifically to customer service and what the feedback that they're getting from the population. So is there an opportunity within this committee in the future to kind of get a little bit more specific information?
So the customer feedback and trends was on the June work plan calendars, and we can include in that, you know, some of the language specific concerns that we receive, if that would be helpful.
I think it would be really, really helpful, because, you know, and I appreciate what Board Member Hinsey said, because I think the more data that we can get, the better. And I really appreciate what you said about hiring incentives. And it's not only when someone gets hired, but how are we valuing folks that have this additional skill of communicating with our LEP population? How many, and specifically in customer service, because they're, you know, customer facing, and this is what they do 24/7 at their job. You know, how many folks do we have in that department that can speak Spanish? You know, I don't know what the answer is to that. So I would like to see some data numbers too of our employees and how they can fit into ensuring that we have the type of communication necessary quickly in order to address some of the customers', you know, concerns, complaints, questions, whatever they might have. And in addition to that, you know, is this individual who is being utilized a lot for not only just English, but also Spanish, do they have, you know, a bonus every month or an additional amount of money that they're being paid to demonstrate that they do have a higher skill that is vital for our agency. Is that something that we can get some more information about as well? Because when we're talking about our budget, I want to make sure that we're having a holistic conversation. And if we don't have those types of incentives, I would like to see how that fits into our whole budgeting process.
Okay, so we don't currently have that, but I will take that back and look into how we might stand that up.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I mean, you know, in the city of Vista, we looked at that with our firefighters. I mean, it's a critical service. And, you know, if we want to have excellent customer service, I really think it is vital for us to ensure that someone that has a demonstrated level of whether it's, you know, that they need to take a proficiency and qualify for this additional incentive, or that they, you know, we don't have that program, but they've demonstrated that they have really good conversational, you know, bilingual skills, that they are compensated appropriately. I think it's critical, because I've been in situations, you know, in the private sector where I'm one of 2-3 folks that speak Spanish, and I'm being utilized at a much higher rate than some of my coworkers, but yet the compensation is just, it's pretty much the same, right? So I want to see folks that we have that have these skills be incentivized to stay with NCTD because that's a lot of institutional knowledge that these customer service representatives have. And I would love for us to hear a little bit more directly, even from that department, when we're getting updated. So I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just throwing it out there, planting the seed, and hopefully we can continue to discuss this and flesh out what it looks like in the
Happy to
future.
bring that as part of the June report. And then just for knowledge, there are bilingual staff on all 3 of the teams, you know, that cover the work of this committee. So customer service, certainly bilingual folks on that. Planning team, bilingual folks there. Marketing team, bilingual. Because all 3 of those teams interact directly with the public. So we recognize that it's important to have that skill set.
Yeah, definitely. And and I think it would be nice too to kind of have a chart that shows these are the departments that interact directly with customers. And then even going beyond just my ask about customer service, but in what you listed, these different departments, you know, how many folks out of how many folks are bilingual or speak, you know, maybe 3 languages. I mean, who knows? I don't know what our employees can do. I know that they can do a lot, but I want to make sure that we're able to value their contributions, especially in a monetary way. So, thank you. Were there any additional questions or comments? All righty. So this is another informational item, no vote, and that pretty much concludes our meeting. I just got to say that our next scheduled meetings are the Performance, Administration, and Finance PATH Committee meeting. That's May 8th, 2023 at 11 a.m. and our regular board meeting, May 18th, 2023 at 2 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much for your questions, comments, and all the presentations. Have a wonderful rest of your day.